Let's begin this hour with a closer look at the elections in Mexico yesterday. The country went to the polls, and although the results are not totally official yet, Enrique Peña Nieto is believed to be the winner, the next president of Mexico. He has 38% of the vote, despite being in the party that ruled Mexico with an iron fist for more than 7 decades, up until the year 2000. Now, the party accused of being corrupt will be back in power after 12 years of what many say may have been a government with less corruption, but much more danger in terms of violence, with tens of thousands of people killed. Still, critics of the next president say his party has not cleaned up their act at all. In a column in the LA Times a few months ago, the editor-in-chief of the Mexican Law Review, John Ackerman, says this: Peña Nieto is a wolf in sheep's clothing. He hides behind a telegenic smile and sharp attire, but he represents Mexico's old, corrupt political class. And John Ackerman is here now. He's also, by the way, a professor of the National Autonomous University of Mexico and a columnist for Proceso magazine. Hey there, John. Strong words there. Why do you think Nieto is not who he says he is?
Well, I think that there's not much evidence to indicate that he is anything different or new. He's talking about, being a modern, different a member of this PRI, the Party of the Institutional Revolution, but the evidence demonstrates that it's just not the case. Peña Nieto is one of the leading governors of the PRI. The PRI historically has been divided into 2 different sectors. One, the technocrats, the more sort of sophisticated intellectual branch of the PRI, and then the side which are basically represented by the governors, which is more of sort of the local bosses who control politics based on sort of machine politics and tend to be quite corrupt and not very transparent.
The way you said bosses there sort of reminded me of the way we might talk about the mob here in the United States.
Sure, exactly. I think that's a correct analogy. The worst states for this or the areas of the country of this are those Mexican states which have still not undergone democratic transition. So, for instance, 10 out of the 32 states in Mexico have always been governed by the PRI, this same party, for the last 80 years now. While at the federal level in the year 2000 there was a change in power from the PRI to the PAN, in 10 of the 32 states this never happened. And those 10 states are the most violent, the most corrupt, and the most least transparent states in the country. For instance, Veracruz is in a terrible situation today. We've had 9 journalists killed in the last year and a half there. Tamaulipas, Coahuila, and one of those states is the state of Mexico, where precisely Enrique Peña Nieto has just finished a 6-year stint as governor. That is one of those states which is not as democratically developed, and all of a sudden he's going to leap to the national level as president, and we're going to see how well he can adjust. I'm not really too optimistic, to tell the truth.
It's really interesting, as I've been sort of following the reporting about this, and by the way, there hasn't been that much reporting out of the U.S., but a lot of people who kind of have changed their tune, have changed their vote, have reverted back to this party that ruled for so long, have said that they're doing so because under, the new guard, the new power, it hasn't been better. In fact, it's been worse. People saying, it's been so extremely violent on the streets of Mexico. 50,000 people killed. A lot of them are police officers, people who are supposed to keep the country safe. They're the ones who are sort of targets now. What do you think about this assessment that people are saying, you know what, at least under the old corrupt government, they felt safer?
So we got to look at it from various angles. I think that's true. There is definitely a generalized social discontent in Mexico's democracy. People think it's not functioning. Actually, if you look at the numbers in Latin America, Mexico is the country which gets the lowest numbers in terms of satisfaction with democracy. So only 73% of the population is dissatisfied in democracy. So only about 27% are actually happy with that. So people are upset, both because of violence and also because of lack of economic development. The economic crisis of 2008, 2009 hit Mexico very hard. It was the country that was most hit in the entire region because of that crisis. And so the population is definitely looking for something new, something different. The ironic thing, the paradoxical thing, is that new thing, they're reading it as something but bringing back the old. Although we have to be careful, because the numbers are actually not that huge in terms of the support for Peña Nieto. Then he is going to be, it looks like, next president based on a vote of 38% of the population. 38% of those who voted, which is only in itself 64% of the population, have supported Peña Nieto. So it's actually a relatively small group. About 17 million people out of a country of 115 million people who are going with Peña Nieto. And surprisingly, actually, or not too surprisingly for some, the leftist candidate, López Obrador, who ran for the second time, also did quite well. He got over 15 million votes and came within 6% of Peña Nieto. So the third place finish was by Josefina Vázquez Mota, who was from the party of Calderón, the present party. So that was a clear sort of punishing of that party. But the Mexicans have divided their vote almost halfway between the leftist opposition and the pre-old guard opposition. And so the good news, I guess, is there's going to be a lot of plurality, and that Peña Nieto is not going to be able to rule on his own with an iron fist, because he's going to have a divided Congress, he's going to have the Supreme Court, he's going to have these students who are on the street demanding him to do things. For instance, like opening up the media. The media in Mexico is very concentrated. Two companies control 95% of the television channels in Mexico.
Yeah, certainly interesting. And for those viewers who don't know, Nieto is actually married to a very famous former soap opera star on Televisa. A lot of the corruption charges do come from, Televisa not covering the election fairly. But I want to talk to you about sort of the political process in Mexico. I noticed there weren't really a lot of debates, with Nieto and, as you mentioned, the man believed to be in second place, Andrés Manuel Obrador. Why is that? I mean, here in the U.S., we have too many debates, I think. At least we did leading up to the Republican nominating process. But, why shouldn't the people of Mexico see how these candidates measure up against one another?
Well, I think you're very right about that. That's one of the central problems with the campaigns, was the lack of more open dialogue between the candidates or with society or community groups in general. Peña Nieto, in particular, was the candidate who was very resistant to debating with his other competitors. He's very much a sort of a created image, a TV, telegenic image, who doesn't do quite well in these kind of more spontaneous debates or exchanges with society. And so they did the two debates that are in the law. The law requires you to do two debates. And basically, he was protected by the major television and radio networks, and they just did not invite or organize any additional debates. There was a third debate organized by the student movement itself. That was actually quite an interesting debate. All of the candidates, except for Peña Nieto, attended to that third debate. But once again, the television networks refused to cover it. So this was exclusively transmitted through broadcast through the internet. And it got lots of watchers and followers, but it was not it did not have as much of an impact as it could have if it were actually covered by the television networks. And so there's really been an effort by the powers that be. And you have to understand that Mexico is a very unequal country. 10 families control 10% of GDP in the country. We really have these very powerful robber barons who really chose Peña Nieto as their candidate and were willing to do everything that was possible to make sure that he got in. And it looks like they were successful, at least according to the initial numbers.
Difficult, too, John, when less than 25% of the population there even has internet access at all. The majority of the Mexican population, from what I understand, does have access to TV. So if that is who is indeed controlling the message, of course, that's the message people are going to sort of digest. Appreciate your weighing in on this from Mexico City. John Ackerman, professor at the National Autonomous University of Mexico.